Hey, welcome to the 2020 Quarantine Book Club. Tonight we are going to be discussing The Queen of the Owls with Barbara Linn Probst. Welcome, Barbara, and welcome to my co-admin.
And wait, welcome to the true little Queen of the Owl.
Oh.
I'll tell you the story about this.
So today's live event is hosted by Amy and Nancy Harrington, sisters who founded the Passionistas Project to inspire women to follow their passions. The project features a podcast, live events on their Facebook group, and the Passionistas Project Pack, a quarterly subscription box filled with products from women-owned businesses and female artisans. They are currently taking orders for the spring box, which is shipping now and makes a great Mother's Day gift. Go to thepassionistasproject.com for more information about the box and all of the Passionistas projects. That's a lot. So I welcome, you can't see them, but Amy and Nancy are the behind the scenes people who make this all work, and I appreciate them. So yay, Amy and Nancy. So tonight we have Barbara Linn Probst, who is the author of Queen of the Owls, selected as one of the 20 most anticipated books of 2020 by Working Mother and featured on lists compiled by Parade Magazine, Bustle, Pop Sugar, and Entertainment Weekly. Queen of the Owls won the Bronze Medal for Popular Fiction from the Independent Publishers Association, placed first runner-up in General Fiction for the Eric Hoffer Award, was shortlisted for both the First Horizon and the $2,500 grand prize, and is currently a finalist for the Sarton, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, Award for Women's Fiction. Her second book, The Sound Between the Notes, which just came out this month, recipient of a starred Kirkus Review awarded only to books of remarkable merit, explores timeless questions of identity and belonging through the unique perspective of a musician. Barbara has a PhD in clinical social work and is a serious amateur pianist. Welcome, Barbara. Thank you for joining us in the Quarantine Book Club this month. As we were discussing earlier, the whole world is zoomed out. And so,
I mean, try launching your second book when we're still in a pandemic. I don't think there's very many of us that have launched two books in social quarantine in a pandemic. You know, like whoever dreamed that's what would happen? But here we are, still typing.
But you've done really well. I mean, you're getting lots of notice, you're getting lots of awards, and I'm assuming your sales are great. So that's a really good thing.
Well, you know, it's what happened last year. You know, we all had to just pivot, right? We had to just let go of whatever ideas we had about how it was supposed to be, just keep moving. And I really feel blessed in that way. You know, like we're like this special generation that had to do this and got to do it and figured out that we could still have our voices no matter what, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that the invention of Zoom, and I think that a lot of workplaces have discovered that they don't need to do all this stuff in person, and a lot can be done from home. So I think once, I don't know, if we ever get out of this pandemic, that the workplace is going to change because people don't necessarily have to be at their workplace 40 hours a week. They can do some things from home and be just as productive. So tonight, okay, we're hearing some, my husband's phone, which I can't go get because.
I don't hear it.
Okay, good. Yes. I hear it. So, okay, Barbara, I'm not going to ask the questions that I normally ask of everyone about what you had planned for your launch party. We're just going to dive right in to Queen of the Owls. And I'm just going to say my first impression of this book was that it was a seduction story between this photographer and this academic. And I thought it was going to be an affair. Like that was what the book was going to be about. It was about this man luring this woman, and that was going to be her sexual awakening. But that's not really what happened. And Susan, you may have some questions you want to ask on this front, but I was like, is that where the genesis of this began with the seduction of somebody?
Well, I could just answer that for a minute, because I was an academic for a number of years. So every book has like multiple seeds, multiple sparks that come together, and right. So the one of the sparks that I think relates to what you're saying, this was when the Me Too movement really was beginning. We are not done with it, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I live in New York. Anyway, but it was coming to the public consciousness. So as someone who had spent time in academia, I remember having this thought, there are other ways to manipulate somebody through, not just the most obvious. You can manipulate someone into doing something they might not have done by appealing to their secret wish to be a certain way. So that was one of the germs of this book, but I never had in my mind that it would be an obvious sort of affair. It was much more, and I deliberately made the character of Richard very ambivalent. I mean, I've had people who just hated him, and other people who had mixed feelings about him. And I wanted to leave it a little bit ambivalent. That's something to talk about for those who've actually read the book. But I know you were going to say something, Suzanne, and I didn't mean to just babble.
Oh, no, and usually that train will derail and come back on later. So my train of thought, we'll just treat it as it comes. I too thought it was going to be an affair at the beginning, and I was so glad that it wasn't.
Right.
But it was more, I would say, she had an affair with herself.
I love that. Exactly. I mean, you can be an agent of someone's awakening, even if you're kind of like, I'm trying to find a word that I can actually say online.
You can say anything.
A jerk. I will say a jerk. Even though you're not like the greatest person, but you could fill the role of being the agent of someone's awakening.
Yes.
So she needed him, and she needed in a way to have her fantasy of him. But yeah, I love what you just said. I love that.
She did have an affair with herself.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest love we can have is with ourselves, but
learning.
Well, if you don't love yourself, or if you only accept a part of yourself, she only accepted her brain. So she had to come to love and embrace and include her body, her sensuality. And it was for her. It wasn't for her husband. It wasn't for this photographer. As you said, it was for her.
So we have a question. We have a couple questions coming in here. Okay, what is your academic experience? I thought that portion was portrayed very realistically, and that's from Dana Austin.
Yes, well, I did teach for many years, and actually I had in mind a particular campus that I taught at when I wrote the book. I mean, I changed things, but I kind of had it in my mind, the way that the quad was, and the way that when I write, I actually act things out a lot. I'll actually get up and walk around and make sure that it's going to be real. So I really had this visceral memory of walking on the paths of this campus where I taught. And I have a PhD. I went through the whole process of that. So I definitely did, jobs. But my PhD is in clinical social work. And what that gave me was this deep interest in what makes people tick.
Where did you teach? If I may ask.
Well, no, it's nothing. I taught in New York, and actually the campus I used to teach in every summer was Smith College. And that was because it's in a small town. In New York, the campus is a city campus. It's very different. It's an urban. But I had in mind that this campus, although there's nothing about Smith in this book. It was just what I sort of channeled,
Did Smith start out as an all women's college?
It did. I taught in the Graduate School of Social Work, which was co-ed.
Okay.
So I never was part of that undergrad Smithy world, Sylvia Plath and all that stuff. So this was very different. But I think you do have to have, I'm a very, I feel like you have to embody when you write, like one thing you haven't asked me yet, but like the Hawaii stuff, you know, poor me, I had to go to Hawaii.
Oh.
The things we do for our art. And so I didn't go there specifically for the research, but when I was there, I felt the difference in the heat. The Hawaiian heat is heavy, it's wet, it's thick. And it struck me through my body that O'Keeffe going there would be like, wow, because the heat she knew was the dry, very clean
desert
heat of the desert. So there's something about getting in touch with your embodied experience, to me, when you write, that adds a dimension to the ideas that are in your mind. So
yeah, in Texas with it, it's a dry heat.
It's so different. I mean, I spent time in New Mexico where O'Keeffe had lived and worked. So I saw the landscape, I walked it, I felt what that would have been. And you don't have to describe it literally in your book. You just have to kind of feel that authenticity, you know.
I felt that throughout. Your research was authentic. It seemed everything was believable, and
thank you.
Seemed very well researched. So
yeah. Well, I was when we were talking the other night, I was telling these two lovely ladies one of my woo-woo stories. I'll share it here as well, because what we call research is, yes, you go to libraries. I went to the O'Keeffe Museum and I spent all this time in the archives and all that stuff. But research is a lot more than that. It's going to, in this case, to see the paintings in person, which are so much more powerful. And what's the story I didn't tell you? So I'd had this really strong feeling about one of O'Keeffe's paintings called Black Iris. It's very sensual. It's probably the painting that people thought was very sexual. And I just felt a lot of power in it. So I found out that it's actually owned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, but it hasn't been on public view for a long time. So what do you suppose I did? Of course, I wrote and asked for a private viewing, which you can do. It's a public museum. Anyone can do this stuff. You just have to figure out the red tape. So one of the pictures I posted on the group is this was me and this painting alone in a room. And it was so powerful. So you could feel something about the power of the real object. So to me, research includes just throwing yourself into as many experiences as you can.
So where did you get the idea for this book? Was it like, I'm going to write something about Georgia O'Keeffe? Was that the first? No?
No. There's a lot of things, like I said. Well, I had actually a deleted scene. You know, we all wrote that book, the one that we would die if it ever got published. You know, that first book, right? I'm sure I'm not the only one here who has that. So in that book, there was a scene about with Black Iris. And of course, you know, I never published it. That scene kind of stayed with me. And I don't know why, like in my subconscious. So this is a really wild story. So, so when I was married to my main husband, and he had this big old flat screen TV over the fireplace, which when we departed, he, thank God, took it. I hated that. And so I said, I got to put something in this space that's me, that is going to be who I really am, who I want to be now, who I want to nurture. And I went to an art print store and I saw this poster. It was an O'Keeffe painting, Red Poppy, and I bought it. And it was up on my living room wall for years. I didn't connect it to this book until after the book was published. It had been like in my subconscious, that this image of this lushness and this life and this vibrancy was something that I wanted to be and embrace. So it was a very strange thing, but I don't remember what you asked me, but anyway, I didn't know much at all about O'Keeffe when I started writing a book, but I had the idea of a woman who had lived very much in her intellect. I wonder why, and needed to find the parts of herself she had neglected. So that was really the origin of the story. And the O'Keeffe part kind of found me. And then as I read a lot of books, I talked to people, I traveled, you know, it all began to like speak to me.
So was it the art or was it the Stieglitz photographs that kind of caught your attention with George's work?
Yeah, I'd say it was really both. I mean, she was a very interesting woman because, you know, she chose to model. There's a lot of controversy around that, and we could talk about that for a long time, but we'll never really know whether she was being shrewd, whether she was offering herself to her lover and was shocked that he commercialized it, whether she was, I mean, it's what's one thing that fascinated me is in those nudes, she's staring straight into the camera and we know it's her. And there's a thing in the book where the protagonist is researching other nude. And if you look at most other nudes, the face is averted. This was O'Keeffe saying, this is me, my body, me. So that really was very powerful for me. She was quite unique. She was owning it, which is of course what Elizabeth has to do. She has to own the photos. She has to own her own image. So there's a parallel for sure.
So what are your thoughts on Richard? Do you think he used her? I mean, because that was a big question. It's like, does he own this? You know, he took these photographs as an artist. Does he own this? Because I was like, he has to take those down. But then I'm like, no, he doesn't.
Well, I researched this. I looked into this because my partner was a former lawyer, so like he comes in handy for this sort of stuff. So I actually just kidding. So I looked into this, and apparently the law is that as long as he wasn't selling them, he was just he could do whatever he liked. I had to make sure that it was accurate, you know. And so there's a lot of ambivalence, and we don't really know, like, I mean, he says to her, I mean, this is like a spoiler, but he says to her, it helped you to pose. It helped you. So what's the problem?
Yeah.
Interesting. I like to hear what people have to say, not what I have to say, because I wanted to leave space.
So what did you think, Susan?
About him using her?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely. I think he used her. I don't think he was being a magnanimous sort of person at all. I think he knew what he was capable of.
Well, Marilyn just commented, even though he didn't have to take the photos down legally, it was pretty mean to put them up without her consent.
This happens all the time. See, the other thing that started to happen when I was working in the book, a lot of cases in the news about what's called revenge porn.
Oh yeah.
Posting. Yeah, so this is a whole, it's a huge, this is not revenge porn. It was not pornographic, and it was not done out of revenge. But this is a huge thing in our culture, and we haven't been really thinking about it lately. Other things have been more important in the public consciousness, but prior to COVID, this was getting a lot of attention, a lot of conversation around that.
Well, everybody has a camera now. Everyone has a camera. And young people, I taught elementary school, and young people, long before I retired, were taking inappropriate photographs of themselves, of each other. And then we were afraid of pedophilia or whatever, but it was the kids sharing kid to kid. And that, if that doesn't wake us up, that,
That's right. Well, I have to tell you, I asked my daughters in her 20s, when I was working on the book, I sort of said, what do you think of this kind of thing? She said, if you take a photo and you send it to like your boyfriend or you send it to someone, you might as well figure the whole world's going to see it. And if you don't figure that, you're just being dumb. So I took the voice of that generation. It's very interesting. But of course, my protagonist, Elizabeth, is a bookworm. It never occurred to her, even though she knew this guy was a professional photographer. And I wanted to leave the breadcrumbs for the reader to go, wait, like shake her. I want to shake you. Don't you realize? But she didn't, because was wrapped up in her own, what it meant for her. But he even offers to show her, no, I don't want to see them, because if I were to look at the photos on your laptop, I would be out of my own body, and I don't want to. So she just is not thinking. I mean, one of the interesting things about Elizabeth to me is that she makes some poor choices, but we hopefully understand why,
Well, I like what her husband said to her was, thinking is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go? You weren't thinking. And I taught gifted. So I had, the Elizabeths, I had the intellectuals, I had those kiddos in my class. And the joke was, they could solve any problem but a common sense problem. Just, yeah. Oh, gee, how many times did they have their clothes on inside out in my class? And so it was little things like that you just go, where were you? Can you not see that your clothes are inside out? Can you not see, Elizabeth, that this guy has nude pictures of you? You just want to go, oh. And
exactly. Yeah. And, it's interesting because really if you were to ask me what the message of the book is, it's really about trying to be whole, because there's always parts of ourselves that we pay more attention to, and other parts we just brush aside. Maybe we're afraid of them or whatever. But to be someone who is both body and mind, paying attention to the world and also able to think, to feel, to to be sensual and brainy, all of that. It's like I think our deep, at least it's my deepest yearning.
Well, do you remember when our generation, I don't think the young ones now, maybe they do, but like a slumber party game was, do you want to be pretty or do you want to be smart? And you had to choose. It's like, no, you can have it all. But I wasn't raised in the generation where you could have it all.
Me neither. Absolutely. And, I do think that this split in women is very cultural. It's deeply embedded in our culture. I don't, in terms of how we see women. And so this search that a woman has, I don't think it's just you and me to try to bring all those parts together. It's very deep.
I just did something on. We have some more questions, Pamela, but I lost them.
Okay, well, so Amber Lemus has said, I found Elizabeth's interactions with Phoebe interesting, how resistant she was initially, and then eventually seemed to feel like she had been able to connect. Towards the end, she says, that was what happened when two people weren't really friends. Was it intentional for Elizabeth to not seem to have very strong friendships?
Yeah, she's part of her, she hides in this professor role. She was a little afraid of Phoebe. Is a kind of warm. She's threatened by Phoebe, and she doesn't know how to be open to her. And one of the things I tried in the book was to tie up all the threads. So I had her realize that she had missed an opportunity for friendship with someone who was really, in a way, a minor character. I mean, Phoebe's main role in the book was to set certain events in motion, in a way, but she's also human. And I wanted Elizabeth to have this little bit of insight that she had judged Phoebe as being too chirpy, but she didn't even know her. She didn't even know her. So
Well, don't we all make judgments about people before we know them, you know,
Yep.
based on what they look like, how they dress, what, you know.
Yep.
That's to protect ourselves. That's what that's all about, is you don't want to be you don't want that person to reject you first, and you don't want that person to hurt you. So yeah, we judge.
Well, she also knew that she and her husband had a kind of limited relationship. So when she saw other couples that had a sort of ease and a kind of, it scared her, because that meant she had to question her own marriage. And so Phoebe was threatening from that point of view. So that's why I couldn't have, I guess hopefully you've all finished the book. I'm going to ruin it now. But I couldn't have it work out with Ben. There was just no way. You know, she had to, and actually this is a little bit tangential, but sometimes people ask me, like, what's your favorite line in the book? And I do have a favorite line. It's when her husband says to her at the end, I wish we could have done better. And she says, we will. It'll be a different kind of better. So I picture them as not enemies, but maybe finally sort of knowing each other, because she never felt he knew her. He never saw her. But maybe as co-parents, they can actually have a different kind of better. So that came to me, just had to be.
Yeah, I was very glad with the ending. I felt that it was a satisfying conclusion, because of course we're like conditioned to want the happily ever after, and that it'll all work out and they'll be happy. But I think she needed to go off on her own and realize her own power, and that she did what, you know, she set out to do with her dissertation, and she was going to go pursue her own dreams and possibly have a much better, more fulfilling relationship with someone else. Now that she
can imagine that, right?
Well, that's what I imagine what would happen with her. She, you know, she got in touch with herself and had, you know, that affair with herself. So now she was ready to move on and have an affair with someone else. We're getting lots of comments here.
Oh, that's great. Okay, please read them to me.
Oh my gosh. Well, a lot of them are going back to what we were saying earlier. Marilyn said, even though he didn't, Richard, have to take the photos down legally, it was pretty mean to put them up without her consent. Yeah. Deborah said, I definitely think he used her to. Dana said, I really love that Richard was a great photographer and Elizabeth looked gorgeous in her photos. That was satisfying. When she brought Andrea in, I was glad to see that. And then she also said, I liked Richard and was shocked that he exhibited the photos without her consent. Afterward, I could see the manipulative side of him, but boy, I would have been taken in. And then Marilyn said, yes, Elizabeth also had those feelings for Richard, which may have kept her from thinking that he would put them up. Instead, she is still thinking maybe he will make a sexual advance toward her. Linda said, I feel he led her to believe they would have a relationship. And Mary said, definitely, I think he made her believe they were having an affair. I mean, initially it felt that way, like they were meeting after the Tai Chi class. And, you know, I certainly felt like it was leading towards an affair.
Well, there are different levels of it too. I think there was deceit involved. There was excitement and being being different in your life with another person that is different than your mate.
That's right. And having a chance to be a different person with him was what was so compelling. You know, I mean, we're seeing that through her eyes too. So there's certain projection that she's doing. She's also falling in love with Georgia O'Keeffe, of course, right?
Yes. I want to talk about that a little bit. Did you fall in love with Georgia O'Keeffe?
I kind of did. I mean, she was such an interesting woman. I learned so much about her, you know, and she was, if you watch videos of her, she's very crisp, very no nonsense. And it's hard to, she's unknowable. Let's put it like that. And certainly she was a figure unlike any other woman in American painting ever. The only other woman painter that's probably as well known is Frida Kahlo, but she was Mexican. So in terms of American painting, American modernism, she was just iconic at a time. I mean, think about it. She kept her maiden name when women didn't. She defined herself by her work. She lived separately from her husband. I mean, she was an incredible person.
Yeah, people don't understand how rugged and different Amarillo was over a century ago. I mean, she was there when there's not much there now, but she was there when there was nothing there. You know, the school, the places where she taught, that was desolate. We didn't have interstate highways, of course. I drive
through something else. She was something else. And she didn't, the other thing I found so interesting about her is she didn't want her paintings to be interpreted. She was like, just let them speak for themselves. So there's a whole lot of, we could have a whole nother conversation about art.
Well, I wanted to bring that up because one of your questions in the back of the book was, does a work of art benefit from interpretation by others? My husband is an artist as well as my daughter. And I know my husband hates, I mean, he had to do a thing at the Kimball Art Museum talking about art and his art, and he hated it because he does not like to give an interpretation of what he's doing. He thinks that the art is whatever people see and how they interpret it. So what do you think about that?
Well, certainly that's what O'Keeffe believed. She hated when people were projecting, especially when they were projecting all of those feminine stuff, like that her paintings were the essence of womanhood, and it was she painted from the womb, and then it was sexual, and she hated that stuff. And so you have to respect that. But yet Elizabeth, of course, writing a dissertation has to have a theory. So it's an interesting, I think personally, art is what it means to you. And that goes for music, that goes for novels, to some degree, the author, people have different opinions about this, but for me, when I'm writing a book and I'm now working in my third novel, I feel like I'm kind of the vessel for something. And what it's going to mean to different people isn't really in my control. I'm just kind of trying to deliver this baby as best as I can, as truly and cleanly and as well as I can. But I don't own whatever it's going to mean to you.
So you think we should separate the art from the artist? Because this brings up like a controversial subject, like, Woody Allen. People love Woody Allen. I actually have a quote from Woody Allen in my first book. And then now there's all this, negative stuff about.
That's a whole other thing about whether, go back to Ezra Pound, who wrote some of the most incredible changed American poetry. And he was a Nazi. He was an American. He was a Nazi sympathizer, Holocaust denier. What do you do? Dr. Seuss, that's actually a little different. But Ezra Pound is the classic example, someone who was a horrible human being, but a brilliant poet. What do you do with that, right?
What do you do with that?
Not for me to answer, that's outside of my pay grade, but I would say that in terms of the question of not of the behavior of the human being, but of the meaning of the art, then where I personally stand is I think, say, O'Keeffe's paintings can mean many things to different people. And that's why she didn't want to be locked into something, and I think, again, for a novel, which I feel is, you could say it's a work of art, right? Why not? And I mean, it doesn't sound like arrogant, but you know, it's written art. It can mean what people take away from a book can be different for different people. That's the beauty of it.
Oh, yeah. It's totally subjective. All art is subjective.
Right.
Marilyn said, I understand that art is for me, but I do enjoy hearing what other people see and think about a work. I guess I think it will expand my viewing of a piece beyond what I might have superficially seen.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
I love to go hear an artist talk about their work. Sorry, Eric, but it helps me sometimes to like we discuss literature. We can discuss it and what do you think this word meant and why did they put this word in here and why did they use alliteration or this literary device? We do that with literature, but we don't want to do it with art. I want to know, why did you use that shade of red there? Or where did you get that shade of red from? Or, you know, why did you paint something that looked like a vulva? You know, it's
well, the other thing is, she was, in some ways, we don't know if she was just being cagey by pretending that this was only a projection from the art critics. You know, we really don't know. She was a shrewd cookie, and she painted this stuff 100 years ago. So it's really hard for us to be in that context and understand. But you see, again, in terms of the novel, it's really centered around the Hawaii paintings. And I kind of want to keep that focus or bring us back to that O'Keeffe did paintings in Hawaii, which most people don't know about. They don't think of her as a Hawaiian painter. So when I discovered this was brand new to me. And it turns out that O'Keeffe's time in Hawaii, I think it was 9 weeks, was at a really crucial point in her life. Her art she was repeating herself. Her marriage was on the rocks. She was probably starting menopause. She was in her early 50s and accepting the fact she would never have the child she longed to have. She came out, she painted stuff in Hawaii, unlike other things she'd painted. She came back and she bought a house in New Mexico. After that, she said, okay, I'm going to live in New Mexico. Boom. So it was clearly a seminal moment in her life, a turning point. So one of the early titles of this book was Her Own Hawaii, because Elizabeth was searching for what was going to be the Hawaii for her that would be this awakening, this turning point, this doorway into a new life. But I didn't use that title because it sounded like a travelogue, you know? And anyway, I never liked it. But so this sort of power of Hawaii for O'Keeffe, I would venture to say that Elizabeth's Hawaii was Richard's studio, because it was there that she became the person she was going to be henceforth. Entered it one woman, exited, left it a different woman.
Yeah, totally different. I really liked, and one thing that I marked in the book was her Tai Chi experience became completely different. That, I mean, everything in her life, motherhood, wifehood, all of that. But I loved when she met up with them and did Tai Chi after.
Oh, thank you for seeing that. That was like, yeah, I started the book with a Tai Chi where she was trying to kind of like learn it by watching, like with her head, get it right. Let me get the positions right. Because that's what she would do. And in the end, she did it with her body. And also she was willing to be seen doing it in public. So thank you for getting that. That was one of those little author things that I put. There were several different moments in the book where she almost did, you know, if you were to go through and map, do a search for Tai Chi and map where that comes out in the book, you would see a kind of encapsulation of her journey. So, and the other thing I used in the book that was just sort of show her journey was you watch the things she did with her hair. Yeah. This is the little fun stuff that authors do, you know.
So when she got her new makeover, her sister did her hairdo. That was because she didn't like how good she looked when she had her new highlights and everything. So I have a question for you about your hair, since you're also a silver curly.
Like, I feel like I dipped on the hair today. I mean, y'all got the good hair. Look at that. It's like, oh.
So when did you decide to let yourself just be natural? Was it a big decision, or? Because it's a huge thing.
It is. I love you're asking this. So when I was like in high school, I had these rollers the size of beer cans to try to make my hair straight. And I would sleep in them. I don't know how I did this. My parents had a pool. I didn't go in the pool. Of course not. My hair would get ruined. You know, my whole life revolved around trying to make my hair straight. I grew up in California. They called me Brillo Pad. I mean, it was horrible. And my hair was brown then, you know. So then there was a point in my life, this was actually quite a while ago, where I went curly natural. And it was very liberating. So
at what age did you accept that you had curly hair? Because I had the same.
Somewhere in my 30s.
Yep, me too. Mid-30s is when I was like, I have curly hair.
Yeah,
and let it be curly.
And so then it was always so hilarious to me. I would be like in some elevator, and some person would go, "Oh, I love your hair." I'd go like, "Where were you when I was an angst-ridden teenager?" But so I think hair has a lot of power for women.
Oh, totally.
Totally does. And I also did a thing in the book. This is for when I'm a famous writer and graduate students are analyzing my work. But there's a lot of stuff with hair. There's the student whose hair keeps changing color, the student Naomi. There's her sister who's a hairdresser who has something to teach Elizabeth, in fact. There's the mentor, Marion, who has this very put together sort of hair. And so I do use hair as a way of evoking different aspects of femaleness.
I liked Phoebe's hair, and she was very judgmental of Phoebe's hair.
It was kind of like, kind of a little funky, and yeah.
Oh, yeah. She was.
Yes, exactly. So these are the fun things we do when we're writing a book that, you know, you might not actually even notice it consciously, but it's part of the tapestry.
So when did you go silver? When did you say, okay, I am silver, I'm just going to let it be?
Well, I started highlighting my hair. This was one of my post-divorce, things, of course. I had a wonderful hairdresser who would put sort of blonde strands in the brown. And then one day I realized she was putting brown strands in the gray. So it's a little grayer than, but if you look close, you see it's like multicolored, right? But the fake stuff is the dark stuff now. But we love our hair, right? Don't we love our hair?
I love my hair now, but it took me till I was 48.
Oh.
I let my hair go silver when I was 48, and now I'm 50, and I'm like,
very liberating.
It's very liberating.
Yeah, and this is part of like what the book is like, to embrace your beauty. Not like I should be this or that, but like you see how beautiful you are, right? And that this journey, when society tells us we're not good enough, we should be something else.
And Marilyn said that going silver was the most freeing decision that she's made. Yeah. I think I got to go through Pamela's silvering, and I think that you're different. You're not nearly as uptight, or what's the word I'm looking for? You are free too.
I am free. I'm free.
Wait a minute. Did you say I'm uptight?
No, I'm uptight.
I've known Pamela. She was coal black when it was.
Oh, but I mean, it's of course COVID. Like we couldn't get to our hairdressers anyway. So, but I do feel very strongly about this actually, and I told this story the other day to you. But when I was in 8th grade, I was 13. I had a mad crush on this guy named Bill Kingery. I hope you're listening, Bill.
Bill.
And I had my girlfriend ask him what he thought of me. And she came back. I said, "What did he say? What did he say?" And she said, "Oh, well, he said, Barbara, oh, she's a brain." And I was like, I wanted him to say she's hot. And so this question of, again, how to be both, the book is not a thinly disguised memoir, but the emotional, I lived Elizabeth's emotional journey, for sure. Didn't we
Yeah.
all? You know?
Well, not everybody. I mean, some people were hot and that was what people thought. They're just hot. And I mean, my story is I went to junior high and high school with the same guy. And in my senior year of high school, I was helping out in one of my English teacher's class as just a helper. And he said, "Who's that?" to one of my friends. "Who is that?" And it's like, I have gone to school with you for 6 years, but I was so good at like diminishing myself and being the brain and being the nerd and the, on the debate team, that I never embraced, I used to think I was like Quasimodo. And now I look at my old pictures of myself and I was like, dang, I was hot, but I never saw it,
That's
you
right.
know?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, I want to say also her sister in the book, Andrea, I had her as the foil because Andrea was the little pixie, the little, and Andrea thought she was dumb, that Elizabeth was the smart one and she was not very bright. So I had to have at the end where Andrea, to some degree, at least maybe takes the first step to embrace that she could be smart too. So that's the other side. So there were those other people who thought, okay, like, I'm pretty or cute, but I'm not intelligent. But they have to embrace that side.
But
we contain multitudes.
Yes.
We can be many things.
Andrea, though, her gift I saw as relating to people and reading people, from her husband tricks in the bedroom to being able to sustain conversations with the different women that are in her shop. And then she was the one who read her sister's body language and beauty in the photographs. She was the only one who said, "Oh my God, you're beautiful." That her husband didn't say that to her, and she didn't say that to herself, but her sister did. And I think Andrea has a real gift for people. She may not have the business brain, but she has the gift of people skills.
It's true. I mean, I in early drafts of the book, I had the two sisters being like way too snarky at each other, like just a kind of cliche, kind of like, bitchy, snippy. And I had a really wonderful mentor. And one of the things she said was, why? Why can't they just love each other, but they're different? Like, let them be on each other's side. But they just don't quite understand each other. So it's a really big help to deepen that relationship. And the same thing, actually, my mentor also did the same thing with Ben. She said, why does Ben have to be a jerk? Maybe he's just limited, but he means well. And so there's something about seeing the humanity in the secondary characters that I feel is so, so important. Because really, most people mean well. They're trapped by whatever it is they are,
We're all just doing the best we can with the tools we have available
maybe
to
a
us.
couple, not like Hitler, but I mean, like most people. Yeah, and I think, but again, as an author, it's easy to love your protagonist, but you have to love your minor characters too.
Totally.
I loved your minor characters. They were really well-rounded, and I didn't read it and go, I wonder, what does that mean? Why are they doing that? But it didn't matter. I knew enough about them to see their place in Elizabeth's life.
I had a soft spot for Naomi, that little smart-ass student of hers.
There's always a Naomi in every class in college. Okay, so we're winding down with time. Let's talk about your next book. Can you give us the elevator pitch of your book that just came out?
It just happened to have the two book covers here. Can you see? Is this backwards, or can you see it?
No, we can see it.
That's the Queen of the Owls. Same cover designer, who is just a genius, did Sound Between the Notes, and she's just a genius, right? So this one just launched last week. And yeah, I'm like still, this is why I'm a little punchy. And this one is framed around music rather than the visual arts. But it's a similar journey in the way of music helping the protagonist find what's missing. In this case, as an adoptee, what's missing is where do I belong? I mean, Elizabeth, that's not Elizabeth's thing in Queen of the Owls, but in this book, it is her question. And what do I do with my gift? So anyway, it's a very different story, but they share this theme of using an art form as the frame. So that's kind of fun.
And you are actually, in your bio, you are an amateur pianist. So did that inspire?
Amateur means not any good, you know.
No.
It means you don't make money at it.
It means yeah, exactly. It means that you aren't getting paid to play the piano at a bar.
Right. Well, what I like about that is, for me, is that it's an art, it's a study, it's a means of expression that has nothing to do with words. So it lets you get into another part of yourself. And a lot of people, other authors I know, they might paint, they might, you know, do something else that is a kind of another form that's not using words. So, but yeah, that's really, I couldn't have written The Sound Between the Notes if I hadn't really had a deep study of music, for sure.
Cool. Do we have any other questions in here?
I wanted to know about New Mexico, but I mean, I know we're running out of time. So I wanted to know how much time you spent in New Mexico.
Is it Abiquiu? Is that where she's at, Abiquiu?
Ghost Ranch. Well, I can say one thing about that since this is the 2020 quarantine, that my dream event, I was going to go in April of 2020 to do a big event at Ghost Ranch, which is where O'Keeffe lived and worked and painted. And it was a great big deal. It was my dream event. Duh, it was canceled. So I just stayed on this. I kept my relationship. There's wonderful people there. And I ended up having a virtual event last November on Georgia O'Keeffe's birthday, where I was like the keynote event for the Ghost Ranch online. And I tell people this because your dream event as an author might happen 6 months later in a different form, but don't give up, you know?
Have you stayed at Ghost Ranch? Did you stay at?
I had been there during my travels, yes. But I wanted to come back there with the book, you know.
Yeah.
And bring it to the community. So
one of my favorite places on earth. I love it there.
It's very special, and the people there, they're just amazing, right?
Something in the air, the whole.
Yeah.
If those of you out there, if you've never been,
I lived in the Southwest for 10 years, so I wish we'd never moved from Colorado. We lived in the Four Corners area. So we went to New Mexico a lot. I mean, I would think you'd love Taos, Susan.
I love Taos. That's one of my favorites, but I just go to Abiquiu and there's something about it's a get right. Sedona has a hum.
Oh, I love Sedona.
Sedona's a little different. Sedona's a little too aware of itself being Sedona, right? You know what I mean? No, we were there too. But the thing with Ghost Ranch that's so cool is you can go and see the actual places that O'Keeffe painted. It's really quite a special. Again, it's just, yeah.
So desolate. And she drove out there in a Model T or a Ford and retrofitted, and it gets so hot out there. I look back at that. I don't know how she did it.
She painted in the car. She fixed up her car because of the heat, so she could sit inside and paint and look out the window at the scenery when it was very hot out. So many things I learned about her. Such an interesting woman. That's a whole nother hour, but it's fun. The research is fun, definitely. But
I loved it.
Cool.
Okay, so Amy and Nancy, can we do the Wheel of Fortune to give away Barbara's book? We're just doing one copy, right? Just the one. Okay. So one winner. All right. This is my favorite part.
This is pretty cool.
Our names are.
And Peggy Gleason won. Yay. I love that it has like canned applause.
We'll have to
Wheel. Oh, fortune.
Listen, I wanted my commercial that if you found Queen of the Owls interesting, I hope you'll have a look at the sound between the notes, because it's a more complicated book, and I don't say complicated. In a certain way, there's more elements to it because it's got 2 timelines in it. But I think if you like the one, you'll like the other one. Just have a look. You know.
And I just want to remind everyone, if you have read Queen of the Owls, to go onto Amazon or Goodreads or BookBub and leave a review. It doesn't have to say much. It could just say, I like this book. And
one sentence and then a lot of stars.
Yes.
But I mean, people don't realize that Amazon, the all-powerful Amazon, has this algorithm. And if a book gets a bunch of new reviews, it pops into that thing of customers who like this. Well, and so we're at their mercy. So people don't realize how important that is.
They are. It is like the most important thing. And Amazon, I mean, yeah, they are the big game in the world right now. And so
we'll put that on the group tomorrow.
Yes, please leave reviews.
Thank you.
Or just, even just doing a star, rating it is, it
5
just
stars,
gets.
one word. Great.
Just say loved it. Loved it.
Yeah.
That's all you have to say. Actually, it's not so good to put a rating without a review, actually. Because
Really?
There are trolls that go through and they'll give books 1-star ratings with no reviews. And I really feel like if you can't take the trouble to write a phrase, that we don't know that there aren't trolls going through there. So I actually think just loved it is good enough. It means that you have your name on it and you're a person,
Right.
So I actually feel strongly about it.
Yeah. Later this month, I'm going to be a read of the day for somebody that gets a lot of things. And we're trying to get my book to get, sticky on Amazon.
Yeah. It is. It's endless, and, you all, we put our hearts into these, right? We just put our hearts in it. So
it's very vulnerable to write a book. You have to be very vulnerable to write a book, and you have to have a thick skin. I admire it.
Hey, you know what? I appreciate those 2-star reviews just as much as those 5-star reviews, because if a book only has 5-star reviews,
it's just your friend.
You're like, yeah, it's like, that's just their friends.
Yeah, well, no, what you want are people, even if someone says, I hated Richard, I hated this book because I hated Richard, it means that they reacted to it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not everyone's going to love a book, but if all it is algorithms. It doesn't even have to be like a 5 stars are nice.
That would be okay.
But if you 3, 4, 5, I'm not saying that, do that to Barbara. You can do it to me if you want.
To other people.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us this month. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Amy and Nancy, for making this all run. Our book that we're reading right now is The Baddest Girl on the Planet. I have finished it and I want to kick Mike Tyson's ass. And if you don't know what I'm saying, you'll find out. It's a very funny book. So we're going to be talking with the author, Heather Freese, on May 13th. So good night and
Thank you.
Happy reading.
Thank you.
Good night.